Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be going ahead and unboxing the HP Spectre. This is the x360 2-in-1 with the Intel 10th generation i7 processor. Pull up a chair and grab a snack while we unbox this monster.
This is going to take a long time, so you may want to get some snacks.
If you haven't already done so, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Thanks. So we got some kind of a technical support slash warranty type manual here. Comes with a stylus because this does support artistic uses. With an OLED display, it's going to be really good for that. This is a 4K OLED display on this thing. It's going to be gorgeous. With a little power cable. Pretty standard 3-pin. And a little power brick itself. Looks like it's okay. It's like a USB-C or maybe a Thunderbolt 3 style power adapter. So that's, I don't know if that's going to use up one of the ones on the system or not. This has 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports on this laptop. I kind of wonder if you have to power it through one of them, which really only gives you access to one more to use for anything else, which is sort of a bummer if that's how that plays out. But at least it has one. And we've got some kind of a setup instruction guide here. It's a little blurry, sorry. Tells you how to plug it in, which it does look like you plug it into one of the Thunderbolt 3 ports. So there you go. And a little power button on there. Shows how to open it up. Some general information about how to connect to Wi-Fi and whatnot. It's pretty basic standard stuff for people who may not be super familiar with using a new computer. And then this is the machine itself. I actually had an older generation one of these before, but it wasn't nearly as nice as this one, which of course it was older, so there you go. But this one has got some bells and whistles that are pretty much amazing as far as I'm concerned. You may be wondering why I'm doing another laptop review slash unboxing so soon, considering I just had that Dell G5 5590 that I unboxed. I had to return that to the store today because it was overheating. Specifically the CPU on those things runs absurdly hot, and nothing I tried was really mitigating against that, unfortunately. It uses an i7-9750H, and it was constantly getting to pretty close to 100 degrees no matter what I did with it. I even bought like external cooling products like an O-Polar laptop cooler, which is like a little suction vacuum type thing that you mount on the back of the system, and it pulls the hot air out of it. And I mean, it was pulling hot air out like you wouldn't believe, and the temperature on the CPU was still ridiculous. You know, I even tried like downclocking it and doing different things, and it was regularly in the 90s and hitting 100 degrees and thermal throttling itself. So I just decided I wanted a lower wattage system. This does not have a dedicated GPU, so I won't be able to game on it unless I use my eGPU, which is why I wanted to get another system with Thunderbolt 3. This does have 2 of those. I think, like I said, one of them is now going to be used for connecting the power, but the other one I can still hook up to my Sonnet breakaway box and put like my RTX 2060 in there, for example, or better. I've got a 2060 KO, I've got a 2070 Super from EVGA, and I've got my 2080 Ti from Zotac. So I can do any of those really, although putting the 2080 Ti may or may not fit in that Sonnet box, and that'd be kind of a pain in the ass to take it out of my main system. I don't really want to do that, but at least that's an option to screw around with this, because this is a 4K OLED touch display, and this thing is it's capable of doing the whole convertible thing, so you can flip it around and use it like it's a tablet, or you can use it like it's a laptop. And hopefully now I can sell off my I have a Samsung Galaxy Tab S6 that I was sort of trying to sell for a while, and if I've got this, I really don't need that. I can do artwork on this. I used to be really into art. Some of you guys may or may not know that about me. I used to really be into drawing when I was younger and got into art competitions and so forth, but I just, for some reason, after I got out of high school and went in the Army, my interests all got around technology, and I really never got back into the whole drawing thing that much. I've been kind of trying to get back into it lately, and that's why I had that tablet, and I sort of did stuff with it, but I'd almost rather have a Windows platform than an Android platform to get access to certain Windows applications like GIMP, or if I wanted to get Photoshop or whatever. But also, like I said, I can at least hook this up to the eGPU, you know, use it for various things. But I think just for even watching movies and stuff on the go, and its portability, I mean, this thing is extremely light. I'll have to find out what the exact weight of it is, and I'll put that on the screen here in a minute. But yeah, I mean, this thing doesn't weigh hardly anything. It's 13.3 inches display, and so you know, it's not very big, of course. 4K is going to be extremely pixel dense on this thing, to the point where it's kind of like maybe you're not really getting that much of a benefit out of the fact that it's a 4K display, other than more desktop real estate. But it'll be easy to carry around, easy to hook up to various things. Like I say, small little power adapter, pretty light. Throw it in the bag. Got your little drawing stylus. You know, I'll see what kind of programs come on it. Maybe it'll come with like a free copy of a Photoshop or something like that. That'd be nice. But give me 1 second here, and we'll power this thing up and see how it does. Alright, so I've got it out of the box and I've run some updates on it and got my account on there and so forth. I've just kind of played around with driver updates and the usual kind of stuff you want to do when you first get a PC out of the box. But the specs on this is the new Intel i7 1065 G7 processor. That is a quad core with hyper-threading, and it looks like it has a 1.3 gigahertz clock, but it will boost up to like 3.6. And it's only a 15-watt CPU, so that's partly why I wanted to get a different machine from that Dell G5. That was a 45-watt CPU hex core, which, I mean, you'd argue, of course, that you want more power, but it just could not dissipate the heat that that thing was putting out, whereas this thing seems to do a pretty good job of, you know, it was like idling at like 40-ish, and it got up to like 60 a few times when the CPU was getting utilized. I've kind of got it sitting on a flat surface there. You want to have a little bit of space under this machine by the looks of things. The vent is on the bottom of it, and so the heat will not get out real well unless you have have it up off the ground a little bit. I've seen on Amazon there's a little product that basically adds like feet to the back end of, the back two ends of a small machine like this, or any laptop really, but it just creates enough of a gap between like the lower vent of the machine to get some fresh air in there. So I might get something like that for it. They're cheap, like $10 or something, and you can get a little better ventilation underneath the laptop. But in general, this seems to be running at a much better temperature than the previous one did, so that's good. It has a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD plus 32 gigs of Intel Optane memory for a little extra speed bump there. We've got 16 gigabytes of it says on board, and I think when it says on board, they mean like they've soldered the RAM to the board in this thing. I don't think that you can upgrade the RAM on this model, or anything for that matter. They're kind of getting like Apple, which take it or leave how you like that. But like I say, it's 16 gigs of onboard low power DDR4 SD RAM. And like I say, when I went in and looked at like CPU-Z, for example, like it was looking for DIMM slots and it couldn't find anything in either DIMM slot. So I don't think there are any DIMM slots. I think they just soldered the RAM to the board of this thing. So that's 16 gigs of RAM is more than enough right now, but I don't believe it can be upgraded for the future, so that's sort of a bummer. I'll try to look into that and see if I can find any more information on it, but for right now, just based on what I'm reading and what I've found playing around Windows for 5 minutes or so, that seems to be the reality, is that you probably can't upgrade it. So that's sort of a bummer. Does not have an optical drive. I mean, it's a very small machine, but even most larger modern machines aren't having like a CD or a DVD drive anymore. But I do have like an external Blu-ray drive, and you do have one full USB slot on the left-hand side of the machine. It's got a little. You've ever seen like an Ethernet port that has like the little under door on it that you have to push down, and you can push in the connection. This has got like a little door hinge thing on it that kind of partially covers the USB slot that you actually have to kind of push down a little bit just to use a regular USB. Sort of weird, but they have that on there. But it does have the one USB 3-port standard. There's 2 Thunderbolt 3s. One you plug in for power, but the other you can use for whatever. And I think with the eGPU, you could actually run the laptop off of the eGPU, which would still leave the other Thunderbolt 3 theoretically open. So you could almost do 2 like external Thunderbolt 3 devices. Like if you had an external Thunderbolt 3 drive enclosure for like a solid state drive or whatever, you could still use that and use your eGPU. So, when you're out on the go, you've got the small form factor, you've got the light portability, the beautiful display for watching movies, or you can of course doodle on it with your little stylus there, and it being a convertible that can be turned into a tablet. You can draw on it, that kind of thing. But when you get home and you want to use a little bit more, maybe play some games on it, or you want to do some more intensive things that require a little bit more GPU horsepower, you can plug it into your eGPU and it will run off of that. And then again, if you have if you wanted to use an external Thunderbolt drive or USB-C drive for some purpose, like additional storage, 1 terabyte is pretty good, but if you're going to use it for like video editing or something, you can fill that up pretty fast. So just something to think of. But that allows you to have a little flexibility there. It has a 13.3-inch 4K OLED display with 400 nits of brightness, which from what I understand, for true HDR on OLED you need 500 nits, so this is pretty close to the cap of what you want for good HDR functionality on an OLED display. And I did verify within Windows that the HDR does work. You have the option just to go right into right-click on your desktop, go into Display Properties, enable HDR like you would on an HDR monitor or a television set if it was hooked up to your PC. So in the past, I've tried fooling around with stuff like that, like the old Alienware 13 R3 OLED that I had. HDR was kind of a new thing then. Like OLED had been around for a while, but HDR had not, and so you couldn't enable it initially until you did like a BIOS update, and then you could use it for certain things. But it was like you could only use it for watching video and not playing games, because that monitor or that laptop had like an IGP and a dedicated card, and something to do with the way that they split the resources on that. You couldn't game in HDR. You could just watch like Netflix HDR, for example, or YouTube HDR. So it's sort of weird. But I've played around with it a little bit. I did watch a couple YouTube videos on it. The display on this thing is magnificent. It's the nicest display I've ever seen. Now granted, it's not very large, so you know, take or leave. If you think a 4K display at only 13.3 inches is really necessarily a good thing because of the high pixel density, but it's beautiful. You know, any video like I've loaded up on it on YouTube even, and YouTube is pretty compressed. Like I'd like to see if I'd like to get a 4K external Blu-ray drive and rip some of my 4K Blu-rays and try to play them on something like this and see how that looks, or just like do it over my NAS on my home network or something. But it's gorgeous. Gorgeous display, gorgeous display. The CPU, even though, like as I mentioned, it's like it idles at 1.3 and it boosts up to like 3.6 or 3.3. I'll have to verify that, but it's very snappy. It gets around in Windows very quickly. Installation of the things that I've been installing has been pretty fast. I still got to download Steam and throw some kind of a game on here because I'm going to hook up the eGPU in a minute, and I'll go ahead and demonstrate that, and we'll see if it can run a game reasonably well. I have no doubt that it will be able to. I'm not going to do any kind of 4K gaming, of course, unless I was going to throw like a 2080 Ti in there. And pretty much any kind of a decent modern GPU is probably going to be bottlenecked a little bit by this CPU, just because it's a low wattage CPU. Hard to say for sure, but like I say, it doesn't run at very high clock speeds. So I mean, it'll probably be okay with 2060, and that's what I'm going to try it with, is the RTX 2060 EVGA KO that I reviewed before. I'm going to try it with that, and I'll just try some gaming in like 1080p, maybe 1440p might be okay with that. We'll see what it does, but I might run a benchmark or two. We'll give that a shot here in a minute. It does have a fingerprint reader if you're into that sort of thing. It does have an infrared camera, it says, which I'm not sure how that is usable, but it has like a web camera. It doesn't mention in the specs anywhere like what resolution it runs at, so I'll have to play with that and maybe get that information. If anybody wants to know more about the webcam, ask in the comment section below, and I will make an attempt to find out more about it. It's not something I really care about personally. I'm not going to use it for anything probably, but it is there. And it does have a multi-touch enabled touch screen, which is awesome. So, I mean, this thing has every bell and whistle you can imagine for something in this size range, except for it doesn't have a dedicated GPU, but it does have the Intel Iris graphics, which I think is like basically their latest integrated, which, you know, it's still not going to do anything for gaming more than likely. If this thing had even like an NVIDIA like MX 330 or whatever the hell the best MX series card is, you know, just so it would have a little bit more GPU horsepower, that would have been cool, but it's not that big of a deal because, like I said, I can use the eGPU and whatever. So that's the specifications. We'll go ahead and take a second here, and I'll open up this stylus and we'll have a look at it real quick. But I'm not going to play around with that kind of functionality too much. One other thing that it did come with, which is pretty nice, which I forgot to show you guys, is you get this nice, it's like a sleeve that you can carry around the notebook in. And as I recall, again, I think I mentioned earlier that I had like an older generation model of one of these before, and it came with the same thing in the past. So you get like a nice little sleeve to carry it around in. Again, it's pretty lightweight, and I don't know what this material is. It looks kind of like leather. It probably isn't, but a little Velcro cover so you can carry it around and put it in your backpack, and it'll stay protected and not get scratched up. So that's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and take out this little thing here, this little stylus, and look at that, see what it looks like. I will probably be playing around with that eventually. I like to do like GIF images and things like that, memes on the internet, and so this will let me do some editing of that sort of thing. Okay, yeah, it looks pretty nice. Looks like it takes a full, I think that's a AAA battery. That looks, I'm not sure what that is. That doesn't look like AAA. That's smaller than AAA. Doesn't want to come out of there. It's quadruple A. I don't think I've ever even heard of a quadruple A battery. Hold on, sorry. I can't get the camera to focus on it. I'm sorry. It's like there's too many things in the display, but whatever. It takes a quadruple A battery for that. That's the first time I've ever heard of a quadruple A. That's interesting. Something new every day here, folks. And it has a couple little additional nibs in case your pen nib wears out. And then you've got some instruction guide here on how to utilize the pen. Let's see, I'm just kind of reading it here. So it shows you how to take it apart and install your battery, and shows you how to utilize it on the display and what the different buttons do. So gives you a little walkthrough. But that said, I think next up I'm going to go ahead and connect this up to the eGPU. We're going to verify that it can actually be powered by the eGPU, which I believe it can be. I'm pretty sure that's why you get like a 550 watt power supply. That's what I have in my Sonnet breakout box is a 550 watt because it's supposed to be able to power whatever machine it's connected to, in addition to something magnetic on there. Not sure what that's about. I think it's because the speakers are in there. I think they must have some magnetism. But I was going to say, I think that the Sonnet box is supposed to be able to power the machine if it needs it, in addition to running the GPU that you've put inside of it. And that I think that the 2060 KO uses about 150 watts maximum. And then this thing, I don't know how many watts it uses total, but it's a 15 watt CPU, and the IGP is part of that. So pretty low wattage consumption for this system. So I guess what I'll do here is shut down. I'm going to go ahead and connect that up, and we'll test it out, and we'll run a game or two and see how it goes. I'll install, some kind of a game that we can play with and just see what it does. Be back in a minute. Alright, so I did get the eGPU to work, sort of. It works in some games that I tried. Like I tried Gary's mod, which is based off Half-Life 2, for those of you who may not be familiar with that. And I did Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, and that also ran. If you hear a little jingle bell in the back, that's my cat. He's playing with his toys. But that ran quite well. They both actually ran really well. And I ran them at 1080p because 4K is a bit much for an RTX 2060. And like I said, the CPU on this thing is not super powerful. Although, as you go higher resolution, you get more GPU bound. So, what was it? Gary's mod ran at like 97 frames a second in 1080p, but it was like 65 in 4K. So it wasn't a huge loss because as I went GPU bound, I got away from this sort of semi-weakish CPU. It became more GPU bound, and Gary's mod is a really old game. Half-Life 2 is extremely old, so it's just a really old game engine, and it was able to continue to run it pretty well. Senua's Story, I ran at just 1080p, but it was keeping a pretty good frame rate. I couldn't tell you what the frame rate was. Like, for some reason the overlay wasn't working, but it felt like it was running pretty smooth. Like, I'd say at least 45 to 50 frames a second, so it was doing fine at 1080p. It might have been a little bit higher frame rate than that. So it was doing a good job. I found that HDR doesn't work very well with the eGPU. Like, it won't even let me turn it on, actually. And I was having all these flickering problems with the screen for a while, where it kept sort of cutting in and out randomly. Not like real bad to where like it was a constant thing, but it would do it sort of fairly often. And it turned out, because this is sort of weird, but like if you just had the integrated card enabled, you could turn on HDR, but then if you also installed the eGPU after that, it was like it was half enabled and half not enabled, if that makes any sense. So it was like it kept kind of trying to go between both modes, and it had a hard time, it was flickering and whatnot doing that. As soon as I shut HDR off, the flickering has gone away entirely. It's been fine, so that's clearly what was causing that. But you can't go into NVIDIA control panel for some reason. It keeps telling me that my NVIDIA GPU is not plugged into the display, which, theoretically it isn't, but like I say, strange enough, it works with the games that I tested. It didn't work with 3D Mark Firestrike. I tried to do, or Time Spy. I tried to get that going like 3 or 4 different times, and it just it uses the integrated GPU, and so it runs like crap. And I can't tell it what GPU to use because the NVIDIA control panel won't load. The reason I got the LG monitor sitting over there on the left, you may see, is because I was thinking if I could connect a dedicated display to the GPU, it would enable the control panel and let me make some changes to the settings, which it did. But as soon as I disable it, it's like those settings are for that display only, and so they didn't affect the laptop display, and it continued to say that there wasn't an NVIDIA GPU connected to the laptop, and thus the games, the games, like I said, worked, but I couldn't make any changes to the driver settings that, to help the game one way or another, and I wasn't able to, I wanted to tell it to run at full performance mode instead of optimized for power, and it doesn't work. The card sits at like 300 megahertz, which actually that card will boost up to like 1900 something when you're in a game. But as soon as you start the game, within like a couple seconds, it goes right up to where it should be. It is still boosting over 1900 megahertz. So it seemed to work fine. I just thought like if I could tell it to run at 100% all the time, or like full performance all the time, that maybe it would then work with the benchmark. But like I say, it just didn't work, unfortunately. So eGPU is sort of a hit or miss thing with this. I've only tested 2 games, but it did work with both games. Hard to say if it's super reliable or not. Maybe it depends on what version of DirectX the game is. Couldn't tell you about that. And HDR doesn't seem to work with the eGPU. It only works with the integrated card as of right now. You know, maybe it'll change later. I did check that I have the latest version of the BIOS. Another thing that I had a problem with getting stuff to work very well was BitLocker comes with the Windows installed. Like this is the second machine. Like that Dell laptop I had the same problem where I had to disable BitLocker because just plugging in the eGPU would force me to type in this long BitLocker code to unlock the PC because it detected that as a hardware change. And so that was getting kind of irritating. So I just disabled BitLocker within Windows, and now I can plug that thing in or unplug it whenever I want. One thing that's cool about it is it does power the laptop. So this Thunderbolt 3 is plugged into one of the ports. I tried it on both ports. It works fine either way. And you can, like I said, I don't need to plug in the actual AC adapter that came with the laptop. If I want to use the eGPU, I just plug it into the Thunderbolt 3 port. I turn on the laptop. It kicks on the Sonnet box with the laptop, and you're in business, and it charges from that, so you don't ever have to worry about having both your Thunderbolt ports taken up. So if you did have an external Thunderbolt 3 SATA drive enclosure or NVMe drive enclosure or some kind of external device that you wanted to use that required Thunderbolt 3, you'd still be able to connect that to the machine on top of using your eGPU to gain access to you know, the benefits thereof. So very nice laptop. It's got the most beautiful display I think I've ever seen. I love OLED. I've always wanted a gaming laptop that could use it, that had all the bells and whistles, and this is pretty close to that. I've played around a little bit with the Stylus. Not a whole lot yet. Like I haven't tried drawing anything with it or anything like that yet, but see, it does work on the touch display. Definitely works just fine. I put the little quadruple A battery in there. That's pretty easy. You just do that. You just twist the end off here like this, and you're in business. You put in the battery and twist it back into place. So that's real easy. It just takes about 2 seconds. I don't know where to buy quadruple A batteries. You might almost have to order that online. I've never seen them for sale in a store, but maybe I just haven't been, you know, it wasn't something I was looking for, I guess. But so the CPU seems to run, you know, like idles in the 40s and gets up into like maybe the high 70s when I was gaming and so forth. And this surface maybe not the best for letting air escape from beneath it. So I think I was mentioning earlier, I would like to get some of those little feet to put on the back of it just so it sits at a slight angle and lets the air escape a little bit better. I can probably get those pretty dirt cheap, so that would be one option. The cooler I bought to work with my Dell that I ended up having to return, the O-Polar, isn't going to work with this because the exhaust has to be on like one of the sides or the back of the machine. In this case, it's on the bottom, so the O-Polar, the way it fits to it, isn't going to work with that. So that's unfortunate, but that was like 28 bucks, and I might actually use that with my old Alienware laptop. I have an old Alienware laptop from way back when that I still play around with for like retro games, so it may not go to waste. And if nothing else, I can hold on to it or sell it or use it for something in the future. Always a way to use something in the future. But anyways, if anybody has any questions, please ask them in the comment section below. Please to give the video a like, maybe share it with your friends if you really think that it's a good video. And if nothing else, leave a comment section to tell me how I'm doing, because it helps in the algorithm. Any kind of comment, positive or negative, will promote the video in the YouTube algorithm and help keep the video visible for other people who may want to watch it. So appreciate everybody watching. I'll talk to you guys again here real soon. Have a great one. Happy Memorial Day. Bye.